Hey, thanks for coming to part 2 of this episode. If you want to find part 1, check the show notes below for a link, or click the info card at the top of the screen right now. Otherwise, please enjoy the rest of the show.
All right, so getting back to it, there's a mental health aspect that I didn't really consider when it comes to contacting ADs, where some people will not even bother sending art directors emails because they're afraid that they will not get a response, because art directors are notorious for not responding to emails because they have so much work to do. Yeah. So what advice would you give to somebody who is scared of not receiving a reply and getting that rejection through omission?
I think just don't expect to get one, honestly. I think I think you shouldn't honestly expect to get a reply. It doesn't mean that they didn't like your work. It doesn't mean that they hated you. It probably just means they didn't have time to write a response. Again, ADs at Wizards, I think their art drop gets hit like, I know it's hundreds of times a day, every single day.
Oh my God.
Applications. Yeah, I've heard a number like that before. So I don't get nearly that many, and I still don't respond to most emails because I just don't have time. So I think just don't expect it, honestly. And again, it's nothing to do with you. And the same goes for rejections as well. If you just get like a blanket rejection email, which is the more common way to do it, like, we've reviewed your portfolio and we're going to go with a different person at this time, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't necessarily mean your work sucks. In fact, it probably doesn't. It probably just means that either someone else was better for the job, someone was closer. And by the way, sorry, I should break that down more. Better for the job doesn't necessarily mean a better artist. It might just mean they had examples of work in their portfolio that naturally aligned with the project, and you didn't. One thing I preach about is that doing work that is in the style of the stuff that you like and also the stuff that you want to work on is huge. That's really important, because if you can show an art director that you understand the project through your art, you're way more likely to get the job than if you're just an awesome artist and you're expecting them to just kind of put 2 and 2 together. That's the thing. So yeah, if you do get a blanket response, it could just mean someone else was better for the job, someone was closer, someone answered quicker, or they're not taking the job anymore, and it's just a blanket response. It can mean a million things. Just don't expect a response. Don't expect to get the job. Temper your expectations, and accept that reaching out is a good thing. Sending your stuff, it will put your name in the short-term memory of the art director, and potentially longer if your work's really, really good. I can't tell you the number of times I've got a portfolio from someone and I've been like, wow, holy crap, like, who's this person? Okay, well, I don't have anything for them right now, but like, we'll we'll bookmark their art station. I'll send it to my head of art and as a like potential for a future project. That kind of thing happens. So be confident in sending your work to studios, especially those that are hiring, but also ones who aren't. And just don't expect to get a response. It's not personal. It's probably just they don't have time to respond.
Especially after this latest round where there was a rumor going around that Wizards was having either a new IP or looking for a lot of artists for a short term. So like on Twitter was everybody saying, hey, submit your portfolio, and so I'm sure they got dumped on beyond normal.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I can't remember where that came. I'm pretty sure, like, didn't Randy say something about that? I think Wizards definitely has been like staffing up for projects, but like they have a huge pool of artists already, so it's like it's such a weird one. It's such a weird one, but I think there's no harm in sending your work. That's definitely the case. And also, there's no harm in sending your work again after a certain period of time when you have new work in your portfolio.
Leisha Hannigan in the chat, who also serves in an art director role, is saying that she files all application emails into a folder, so she doesn't miss any of them, but she doesn't get to reply to all of them. So that sort of speaks to what you were just saying, where it's like, just because you don't get a reply doesn't mean they haven't noticed you and they aren't filing it away for future use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you just have to think about how long it takes to write an email, even to just be like, hey, such and such, thanks so much. It's not quite right now. blah. Like doing that 10 times is exhausting, let alone doing it 50 times.
Even if you're cutting and pasting a pre-written, if you have to do 200 and you work at Wizards and you have to do you're not going to Control V and hit send 200 times.
No, it's madness. Sometimes you might. One thing I will say, actually, when I applied to work on D&D, the first time, I was already working on Magic at that point, so I was already in their system. So again, that's why I felt more confident applying to them at that point. My art director did respond to that one, and she was just like, "Look, I don't have any work for you right now, but thanks for sending this in. I'll keep you in mind." So like that was even as an artist already working on Magic on one of their products. So much, like I said, so much of it is about what happens to be going on right now and if you're the right fit. And I emailed her again, I think 6 months later, to say, "Hey, just as a reminder." And that time she was like, "Oh, actually, we're just doing a push for this right now. I can probably get you onto this." So there's something to be said for an element of persistence. But again, I think that's one of those things that's easier to leverage if you know you're at the point where you could work on that product, or you believe that you could, which I did at that point because my friends were all saying I could.
Have you ever come across examples of approaches to art directors that have been sort of like a little bit more unique and like help the artist stand out? Like understanding that no matter what you do, you may not be right for the project, but maybe something nudged you a little bit higher in their awareness because you sent them flowers or something.
No, I've never had anything like that. That's one of those things that's like so personal. And it's the kind of thing that wouldn't work on me personally. Not flowers, but like the what you're saying, like some people try to be very clever with their applications and try to do really funny like portfolios, and try and lead with like personality first. And that falls real flat for me. like that's just going to elicit a massive fucking groan from me, because I'm just like, just show me the art. Just, like we'll figure out your person, because that's the way it goes, is like, look at your art first. If art is good enough, read your about page. If that's fine, let's check out their Twitter or whatever and make sure that they're not like some nutcase. Like there is like a process to it. So I think if you can express your personality through the way you talk in a simple way, in a short email. I'm a big advocate for short applications. Hi Paul, or hi whoever. Let's say I'm applying for a job with Leisha. I would just be like, "Dear Leisha Hannigan, I love your work on Humblewood, and I've always wanted to work on something like that, or I've always wanted to work on it. Here are some things I've worked on. I've attached some examples of my art. Thanks." That's like the email. That's about as much as I would ever put into an email to an art director. And I wouldn't do any crazy flourishes. Other people may feel differently. Some people, I know artists there's always stories of like, "I sent my portfolio burnt into wood, wrapped in a crocodile's skin, to Wizards of the Coast, and I got hired the next day." Like, maybe that's happened. Sure, I'm sure that has happened at some point. Well, maybe that one has happened, but I'm sure people have done similarly extravagant things and it's worked for them. But for the most part, focus on doing good art. Keep your email simple, and like we're saying, accept that you might not get the job and you might have to try again in 3 months when you've updated your portfolio. The last part being really important. Don't just keep saying the same thing again and again. If it didn't work the first time, chances are it won't work the second time. You can include bits, your best stuff, but showing progression, showing updating, showing that you're working is important, I think.
So earlier you mentioned that you had been working on Pale Tides, your IP, and you haven't launched it yet officially. You've just been casually talking about that you had been working on it. What factors did you consider when deciding, what you did or did not want to be in your IP?
Well, gosh, PT came about because I've worked on a lot of games now, And I've always been interested in game design, but I've never worked as a game designer in a studio before. But I've weighed in on game design and stuff over the years. I've always felt like I have some comfort in it. I really enjoy it, at least. And just that, and being kind of fed up working for people, honestly, which I know sounds very silly and very rude and very pompous, but at a certain point, sometimes you'll work on a project and you will literally feel like I think I know better about this thing, and that's not necessarily an ego thing. That's often like a level of comfort with certain things. Like there's some projects I've worked on where I've been like, I feel like my vision for this thing is better than what we're doing. I will say that's probably happens less often than not. Less often than it doesn't happen that often, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not. I generally have like a pretty realistic view of where I am in the situation, and I like to work with people who are way better than me, and that will always be the case. But with Pale Tides, I felt like I'd worked on a lot of projects where I was just cringing at creative decisions, as were other members of the team. And I was like, you know what? I'd really love to just do my own thing, like build my own world, do all the art direction for it, and then bring on people who are way better than me at like the art and the writing, and just like try to lead a project and to create my own thing. And like I said earlier as well, something of a kind of therapy piece where getting away and focusing on mechanics and world building, and maybe it's just some of the stuff that I believe in very strongly as a game designer or as a game player as well, that I see done poorly often. Even little things like being able to step away from the idea of publisher interaction, being able to step away from or step back from a lot of the kind of stuff we just do in games. Because like, if you work in video games for a while, you'll know that like a lot of stuff's just done because that's how you do it. We include a 30-something-year-old cis male protagonist because it's going to sell copies, even though the research shows that it doesn't matter that much. But this is how it's done. This is what the publishers think. Like, I be able to create my own IP where I don't have any of those constraints, and I can like do exactly what I think is best. And if it fails, then I'll know that it was my fault, and not someone else's dumb idea. Was really, really appealing to me, basically. And that's what it's been. It's been like I've been toying with it for a few years now, maybe 3 years. In the background, sometimes it's snuck forwards into the foreground. I think next year is going to be the first kind of big development year for it. But it's just been very pleasant for me to work on a project with no deadline, where I can spend a week poring over the mechanics for this thing, and where I can come up with the ideas for character creation, and I can sketch some stuff, and then I can just put it away and come back to it, let those ideas kind of percolate and develop. Just things I've learned from my own creative process on, as an artist as well, like stepping away is something that's really hard to do in a studio. It's really hard to do on a production. If you're working on a video game and you've got 2 weeks of pre-production, it's real hard to say, hey, I've got all these cool ideas, can I just like take a week off? And like, I promise they'll be better by the end of that week. Like, no, that doesn't happen. You run with stuff that's underdeveloped, you shine it up, you tweak it. It's a messy process. So it's been really, really fun just having a thing that is mine, that I can just devote boundless time to. While I will say, still having my experience in the publishing side and the marketing side to like pull it back together again. So like, I will have a producer come on at the right time. I will have other game designers working with me at the right times in production. It's not my thing alone. Very roundabout answer for that one, but it's my baby, and it's a chance to make a beautiful art baby. I hope will be Sorry.
Oh, yes. No. I'm sorry. I spoke over you at the end a little bit, but can we talk a little bit more about what Pale Tides is? Can you just bring us up a little bit on what the concept is and where you're at in the process?
Yeah, of course. So Pale Tides is a horror role-playing game. tabletop role-playing game, so not one of these video games. The setting, without going into specifics, it is a original universe, original world, loosely inspired by ours in the sort of 16th, 17th century. Very witchy. It's all about witches, really, and the church, and a kind of interesting blend of like the reality of, you know, the witch hunts and the Inquisition and stuff like that, and a fantastical representation of that stuff, which bleeds into inspiration from your Lovecrafts, your Bloodborns, your Gothic fantasy, all of that kind of stuff. So that's like a rough idea of what it is. In terms of what it is, it's like basically me as a game design nerd trying to write all of the things I think are bad about other role-playing games. As someone who's a fan of D&D but always finds it needlessly complex, as someone who's a fan of Numenera or other Cypher games but finds certain aspects of those systems irritating or maybe just a little bit too greedily for my liking, it's kind of my attempt to create a game system that works, like just fits directly into the world. The two are just like completely interlinked. The concepts from the world are completely matched to the concept of playing the game, and the idea is that through playing the game you should feel part of the world in a way that you don't often in role-playing games. So it's a very heady goals, which are going to require a lot of work to streamline. But I think the easiest way I could describe it is if playing my game feels like a group of people getting together around a Ouija board, that's kind of what I'm going for. And some of the stuff around it works that way. It's all about communication. It's a role-playing game in the traditional sense like D&D, but where the mechanics are stripped back to the point that you don't have to overcomplicate things in your head. You're not having to pull yourself out of the world to do a bunch of maths necessarily. It's much more narratively driven. And then the other part of it would be, so that's like the overall concept. That's what my like concept for how I want the game to work. The other part is like the world and the ways I want to express it. The tabletop game is part of it, but I'm building this as an IP that I can do other stuff with. Like I fully intend to have a short film as part of the release. The Kickstarter that I'll inevitably do in 2022 probably. I think that's the first time I've probably said that, but that's roughly when I'm looking to release it. We'll have like a teaser, like film as part of it. Other things like that. Like I have basically big ideas beyond just the board game and the tabletop game. And I'm kind of planning that stuff as well. It's the kind of thing I would love to see turn into, you know, a series or books, things like that. I'm trying to develop a world that is interesting enough, hopefully, with, you know, especially once I start bringing on more writers to work with me, that hopefully we can do that kind of stuff. You know? So.
That sounds like you have a lot of coals in the fire. You're not just going for a tabletop RPG, you're going for basically a whole franchise. Is that something that you expect to be able to monetize every aspect of it, or is it just a matter of building it up as a whole and maybe some of it will be more successfully monetized than others?
Yeah, I think, I mean, everything can be monetized, but it's like choosing where to do that. It's kind of the same way that my Twitch channel works. It's like, where do you give away stuff for free? Where do you hopefully like try and encourage people to subscribe? Like the role-playing game itself will obviously be a paid-for thing, but if I can supplement that with additional content that is free, I would love to do that. In terms of like all different calls, like my attention right now is 100% on just developing a world. And like that's why it's taking so long. You know, there's not even much art. I've barely done any art for this project because I'm mostly intending to hire people to do the art for it, as well as obviously doing some stuff myself and doing like the kind of art direction concepts myself. So building the world kind of comes first. Then the game is my real priority. But I think it's more a case of just having that other stuff in your head, you know, the whole time. Like I reach out to people if I feel like I've talked to the Castlevania guys briefly. I've talked to different people in different places, different industries, to like express that, like, I'm working on this thing. I feel like it could have legs here. Let's be contacts. This is stuff we can talk about in the future once I make millions off this project, which of course won't happen. But hopefully it'll do well enough that I can keep making it. Honestly, like, all I really want to do, and this is very much a thread in my streams and in everything, is have the financial backing to be able to just make stuff. Because, like I said several times in this, making stuff is the thing that makes me happy. And, like, I love being transparent about things. I love being transparent about all the stuff that I've struggled with over the years. And, if I can help people avoid making the mistakes that I've made over the years as an artist, and if I can just keep making stuff that people like, I'd be really happy. And hopefully Pale Tides for me is like the first part of that, the first big part of that, like the first big Kickstarter that I do, where I hope to hopefully make money, so that I can make more stuff in that universe, and so I can really start building this thing out. And in 10 years or 5 years, in 5 years, we'll have the Pale Tides movie. Like that. I'm always trying to think 10 steps ahead. I will say part of that is just that my background as an art director and a concept artist is always very closely tied to marketing. So I have quite a lot of experience doing marketing for games, working with marketers, and being a person who plays games myself and who knows what I want. So if I can try and make something, that has legs, that appeals to me, that seems like an okay thing to do, I think.
So I can think off the top of my head, like 5 or 6 friends that have their own IP that they're hoping to be able to monetize and make it be worth financially the effort they're putting into it. What are some reasonable avenues that people can, monetize their IP?
I mean, I guess Patreon's a very common one now. I think a combination of Patreon and Twitter is probably the way to go for that kind of stuff. Gumroad as well, obviously, is good. Ko-fi.
Ko-fi.
You say.
Yeah.
Ko-fi.
I'm so glad
Ko-fi,
that you don't know how to pronounce it either.
I have no idea. But I know that they're doing a kind of Gumroad-esque thing as well. I don't know if that's launched. But I don't know. I've talked to them about it before. There is definitely ways to monetize this stuff. A lot of it probably rotates around having some social presence. I think if you're trying to launch a new IP and you don't have anyone following your work, it's not going to go anywhere. I think you need to be developing both. I think it's worthwhile as part of this, a mild tangent, like if you're not comfortable with marketing your work or you don't really know how to, that's fine. You can absolutely learn. I mean, I had to learn the hard way, which is just like trying shit out. Like, if I tweet this, what happens? Okay. What if I tweet this in 12 hours? Is that better? Oh, that's better. Okay. That's when I do. It's a lot of trial and error. But I would say, like, all artists could probably benefit from doing a marketing course or something. I think a lot of us maybe struggle with the idea that it's like, a bit snake oily, or that knowing these things is maybe bad, but like, it's not. It's really good to know, to understand the market. It doesn't mean you have to exploit it. That's always been my thing. I have confidence that my project will be successful because of experience I have launching products for other people for a long time, and that is just gained through doing it. But you could probably learn a lot of that if you did a course or something.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of people come on to talk to us about marketing, whether it was Brian, the director of marketing for D&D, or Farley Creates, who was a few months ago, or Rainan. I'm already forgetting how to pronounce her name correctly. But
Rengen. There's our role, Rengen. But our fifth episode, I think it was Brian, and we titled it "Marketing is not a dirty word" for exactly the reason that you were just mentioning. You know, that people start feeling skeezy anytime the word marketing or networking. You know, like these are terms that I guess it would be nice if we had different terms for. But then I think also maybe it doesn't matter, because once you start talking about monetizing something and making money from it, there's a certain amount of people, a certain percentage of people that are just going to automatically think that they're going to think the worst of you. And then, you know, it's like a very cynical reaction that they have, that you're just trying to, you know, exploit people. But it's like, you're providing a service, you're doing something, you're creating something, you're putting literal blood, sweat, and tears into it. You know, it's okay to be like this. Anyway, I
think it's difficult as well because I think it's really important to talk about that stuff. Like, honestly, it's something I try and talk about a lot. Is like people for the most part aren't aware of the worth of art, or maybe not even the worth of art, but aren't necessarily aware even like what you can earn as an artist. I think whenever you have these like, this is how much artists should charge conversations, people do get thrown off by it, because people at the top charge a lot of money for art. Like, I've worked with artists who charge way more than I do, and like they can, because they have those skills. But like, if you've just started doing art, you know, you're one of these, you've been working freelance on the side for like 2 years, and you're charging $50 for a full illustration, and you have some pro with 15, 20 years in the industry come and be like, I only work for $5,000 per, like, I get it. I get the reaction. You're just like, who the fuck is this guy? How do they feel they can do that? And a lot of it is just education. Like, it's just like teaching people that like $50 is nothing, you know, for what you're doing. You need to finding how much you can charge and how much you should charge, and learning how to navigate towards that so you're paid fairly, like not so that you're overcharging, like so you're being paid fairly for the skills that you've made over the years is like really, really important. And it's and it gets back to the discourse thing. You know, that's why we have so much discourse around pricing, because a lot of students can't even imagine. Like, if you sit down and say, by the way, if you become a lead concept artist at Riot, which you could do, like my friend Eflam went and did that in like 5 years. You know, you could be paid $120K, no worries. You know, and they're like, you know, I can't even imagine being paid that kind of money to work in a studio, and I know that's a thing. It's a whole thing.
I have a hard time convincing people that $30 an hour is still like bottom tier. Not even something you should strive for. It's something that you should start with. Sure.
Yeah. It's I think it is. It's just a difficult topic because everyone has such a different background, different levels of privilege everywhere, of course, and also the industry is very fickle, and that's something we have to fight as well. There are a lot of studios. There's a lot of clients who are not paying what they could be paying. There's a lot of clients that I work with sometimes who could be paying a lot more than they are paying, who've not necessarily upped their rates in a long time. There are some clients, some studios, I don't know if I'm allowed to name names here, so I'm just dancing around it. But there's certain studios that make games like that rhyme with like Laugh Minder that pay absolute trash and expect work on the same quality level as D&D.
And we've talked about that before. It's totally fine. We know Pathfinder pays terribly. There's a company that I'm not going to name names because I don't want to even give them publicity. They pay $25 per illustration.
Yeah, that sounds like a thing. Yeah. It's fucked. It's completely fucked. And the problem is it muddies the water around these discussions.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Is this goes back to just not knowing what people are talking about. You know, and it's like that's just because there is evidence of low paying doesn't mean that is the objective that you should be striving for, the thing to expect. There's a broader context that is happening within, and you have to know what that is. And it's the Twitter conversation again. It's not, you're not getting that information on Twitter most of the time. So,
or if you are, it's getting shut down, and like it's getting subtweeted, and those artists are being abused for telling people how it works, which has happened more often than not recently. Artists trying to give out reasonable advice, just getting abused, basically. Yeah, it's really complex, and it's something that's very difficult to navigate. One of the topics I try and talk about in regards to this stuff is like learning to weigh up the value of taking that bad paying job versus spending that time working on your portfolio so you get better work.
Yeah.
And that's, again, a lot of this stuff I can't give the advice because it's so situational. If you're struggling to make rent or you're struggling to afford food, fucking sure, take on that $25 job if it helps, if it gets you through it. But just don't expect that, or just don't accept that is the norm, and don't accept that you'd probably be better off spending that time working on that folio piece for Humblewood, for Hearthstone, for D&D, so that you can get a good job. Because ultimately those people are just taking advantage of you.
Yeah, I think that's really key what you said, like take it if that's your situation and that's what you have to do to survive, but don't just roll over and accept that that's the way that things are always going to be. Think about your plumber, like how much ask your plumber how much he gets paid, and then, and not to, plumbers are it's an awesome, respectable gig. I'm not trying to shit on plumbers, but that's a weekend course. You know what I mean? Like you can learn to be a plumber relatively quickly. How long did it take you to learn how to be an artist that was good enough to work at, top level studios?
Yeah,
exactly. And how much more do you have yet to learn? Now think about how unfair it is that your plumber is getting paid more than you are.
Yeah, it's fucked to put it bluntly. And again, I speak as someone who has taken a lot of low paying jobs. As someone who worked for free for a year because someone took advantage of me for a long time. It's difficult to navigate this stuff, but as long as you do what you just said and just remind yourself that it doesn't have to be that way, and that it's fine to turn down a job. It's not turning down a job from some random client who wants you to do D&D portraits isn't going to damage your career. Turning down a job from Pathfinder isn't going to damage your career. Now, there is something to be said for having those names on the CV, and for me, that's when I have to start weighing stuff up. And this is something that a lot of people will completely disagree with me on, and I completely understand why. I really understand that perspective. For me, almost as important as having stuff in my portfolio has been having like client names that are valuable. Because even if I don't like the work I did, at least I can still say I worked on this thing. And so occasionally I will take a cut if I'm like, you know what, if I'm in a position where I can get through this stupid like 2-week thing and like get paid garbage, but it's for this Star Wars thing, at least I can then forevermore say, I did work on a Star Wars thing. And I can also glam it up and make it sound way better. So, there's something to be said for that. But again, it's just dependent on your position, how comfortable you are. I always recommend that new artists who are starting out just get a freaking retail job. Work weekends, work however much you need that you don't have to rely on the income from your art. Because, that's what I did for the first 3 years of my career when I was starting out. I started freelancing straight out of university because I had a portfolio already, but I just had to go and work in a shop so I could afford to pay my rent and to get food, and so that I wouldn't have to be devastatingly stressed all the time as a new artist trying to make a living as a freelancer, because it's really hard. It usually takes 3 to 5 years for most people to start getting comfortable income, and that was the case for me for sure.
And part of this too, I think, ties into what you've said about indie versus AAA studios. That even amongst the indie or I put lower tier in scare quotes, that Pathfinder isn't the end all be all either, as far as accepting a gig for exposure, you know, it being paid in exposure bucks. Like there's lots of other shout out Hunters Entertainment. You know, I've been doing freelance for them, and they pay very well, and they've put out respectable games that, you know, like maybe they don't have, you know, the credibility or whatever of, you know, larger types. Yeah, but on a resume, it's for all intents and purposes, it's gonna look just as good. You know, like that's legit. So like, just by you know all of what you've heard of, you know, places that you can apply to, and they're not such great paying. Well, don't think that's the end. Again, that's not the end of the story. More information is needed.
And also, chances are the work you do for that studio is better than you would for Pathfinder because you're enjoying it. You know, there's a huge difference between working for a client who's really nice to you and awesome to work with, and a client who's shitty.
Knowing that your work is being appreciated.
Because I'm sure their ADs are really awesome. I know a lot of people who've worked on Pathfinder, and I don't bemoan that at all. Because again, no art director ever wants to underpay an artist, and I can guarantee that they have these same problems and these same arguments all the time internally. It's almost never the art director's call. But yeah, like, you know, working for a smaller company, work for any company is fine. You know, as long as it gets you making art. You know, you for the first few years of your career, you're not going to be making big bucks necessarily, but if you can make some money and also develop your portfolio and keep moving forwards, then it seems okay to me.
So I know some people are actually trying to actively get away from doing freelance work or working for a company, like as inside a studio. And one of the ways they're doing this is through generating their creating an IP, and then trying to make like tabletop RPG products or comics or whatever else they can think of, like selling prints, etc. What advice would you give to these people for, one, trying to make their IP stand out amongst the sea of IPs that people are creating and trying to pitch, and two, like, how do you actually make people like pay for it? Like, I know you said Patreon, but how do you actually make them take the next step?
Care enough to pay for it.
Yeah, that's the golden ticket. Yeah, that's tough. To the how to get people to pay for it part, I mean, it just needs to be. Okay, to the first part then, how to make it stand out. Make it stand out. Don't make a D&D clone. Like 90% of projects I see are just like D&D, but one of the elf races is blue. You're going to have a really hard time selling that product because D&D exists and it's already very good. If your vision is D&D but with blue elves and a complete overhaul, like a really fresh system that's really different, that could sell, you know. Or if it's a D&D-esque system, the world is totally unique and like really, really interesting, that can work. Try and make something that's somehow unique or stands on its own. Like Pale Tides is a good example of, you know, coming like the challenges I've had going through that exact process are, you know, what are the unique parts of my game? What are the pillars? And it's like a level of accessibility and player and the consistency in the rule system that I've never seen in an RPG. That's interesting. It's not necessarily unique, but it's definitely like a pillar. Creating a world that is unique, that's important. It needs to look unique, and that needs to play through the presentation. It needs to play through the way the art is represented, the cover, the typeface, the way it needs to evoke something I haven't seen in a game before. And that's something I spent a long time messing around with. Like, what is that? And it's like, is it just Bloodborne? And has Bloodborne been done in a role-playing? You know, like, it's looking for those threads to find something unique. So it's like, so that's definitely the first part. Is like, you do need to make it stand out. The second part of that is obviously it needs to be high enough quality in whatever way that manifests. Whether it's, you know, if you're just doing like an IP, you're doing an art book, the art needs to be good. It needs to be good enough at least that people want to buy it. And the only way you can gauge that really is if you put it out on the internet and gauge reactions from people and ask your friends and probably not family, but ask your friends very serious questions about, like, I need you to tell me if this is good, and be prepared for them to say it is, but, and to take that on board and to develop it. Because if your work is not at the level it needs to be at to express whatever it is you want to express, then you might have trouble selling it to other people. It's very difficult to get around that because your friends are always going to be biased and don't want to hurt your feelings and don't necessarily want to take on the sort of emotional burden of giving you critique if you're not necessarily prepared to take it. But I think that's really, really important. It's creating something unique as much as you can, or at least something that's aspirational or something people will want. And that's going to come from research. That's going to come from looking at other products. It's going to come from looking at games that do well and why, looking at games that you like and why they're successful, and finding that thing, that thread, that glowing orb of whatever that is the cool thing that you can put into your game. Maybe it's taking an idea from another game that you've played that you've never seen represented. Maybe you love Stalker, you love the game Stalker, and you're like, I want to make a Stalker-esque RPG. I've never seen that done. That can work. And yeah, making sure you have the skills to make the damn thing, and then finally making sure you can follow through and advertise it, which means, can you make the product at all? That's a big question. Do you know how to put it on the internet and make people see it? That's a thing you have to tackle. But I think those three things are kind of the stuff you need to make a product successful, really.
So you mentioned before having some experience in marketing, and I imagine that you will be putting a lot of that experience into play over the course of the coming months in developing this and promoting it.
Yeah.
Will you also, in the course of that, make a Gumroad tutorial for the rest of us so that we
can... On the marketing part?
Yes.
Yes, I can do that. I mean, actually, like, I would really enjoy doing that kind of thing. That'd be really fun.
I think that would be awesome. I consider this my personal request for such a thing. But in the meantime, do you plan on like building the whole thing and then just like making a launch of one huge product, or do you foresee smaller products that you will create as lead-ups to the fully realized?
So for PT specifically, I'm not sure if this will answer your question. I'm not going to be selling anything before the game comes out, if that makes sense. My plan is very much I'm forgetting words tonight. It can change. It's very likely to change. And also, for all of my experience in marketing, I'll probably be bringing on a marketing expert to work with me on it, to help me like plan for the launch. Just because I've done that in the past. I've worked on projects in the past where we brought on someone really experienced, and it was fascinating watching like that process. And my process is always bring on people who are better than you and try and work with them or learn from them. But what I will be doing is it will be kickstarted for sure, just because I like that kind of energy, and I will be releasing stuff in the run-up to it to start. Like a lot of the conversations I'm having around Pale Tides right now are very much like early kind of taster. Here's some things, here's some themes, get your brains working and kind of whet appetites early, so that once I start hinting at things, I'm not sure how that's going to work yet, whether it'll be art based or writing based or video based. I'm not really sure, but I'll probably start leaving a bread trail at a certain point, right? A breadcrumb trail towards the Kickstarter that will start to build up more and more an idea of what this thing is. I mean, again, this is just like my taste in marketing. I enjoy that. I don't like seeing too much at once. I want little things to kind of latch onto that I'm like, what is this thing? Because I'm thinking my peers all know this thing. You guys know this thing. The people watching, some of them have heard of this project. I'm trying to think of like everyone else in the world who doesn't follow my Twitter. What are the things that get people excited? What's the energy of my project, and how do I start leaving those little pieces to get people excited, to build up interest, so that over time I can leverage, my kind of social clout or whatever to make more eyeballs. It's like the Eye of Sauron. I want people to slowly start to turn towards this project so that when I launch the Kickstarter, they can't escape. I don't know where to go with this analogy anymore. But yeah, does that answer it? I don't. It's not really like a different products. The product will be a Kickstarter, but there will be more that will spurt off from that.
Yeah, no, it definitely does answer. I get a little bit of yes and a little bit of no from it. But one thing I wanted to just comment on that I think is interesting is that, it might be tempting from an outsider's point of view to think like, oh, well, he's Paul Canavan. He's won awards. He's worked on Warhammer and Magic, and of course his thing is going to be successful. But even you are thinking about how much further in advance you have to start prepping the lead up to it. So it's not this thing that you're just like stepping into. I'm Paul Canavan, buy my thing, So if I'm
just some artist,
right.
I don't think of myself as special in that.
No, yeah. And I give you that due credit. I'm just saying, an outsider looking in might think that it appeared one day and it was nothing but your capital, like leveraging your social capital or whatever. But it takes a lot of work. So
yeah, I think no matter who you are, it's the same process, really. Producing, the advantages I have built up over the years are just like contacts and visibility, and those are really important. And I actually do. I have some friends who are working on RPG projects that they aren't. They don't have that. They don't share their stuff online very much. They don't really have a kind of community or a following or anything like that. And I think that will be really hard for them when they come to launch it. I don't think building a social presence is everything, but it is really, really, really useful, because it means that the potential eyeballs you can have on your project are, obviously a lot more than if I had 500 followers on which is a lot of people. 500 followers is a lot of people on Twitter, or 200. It's lots of people, and it's more to do with how engaged they are in stuff and how much you engage them. But if those people if you're never posting anything and you're never engaging with anyone, then that number is kind of meaningless, honestly. I try and be as quite busy on social stuff and try and talk to people and try and share stuff because I want them to like my thing, and it's not because I want them to buy the thing either. It's just that I genuinely want people to be interested in stuff, and I like interacting with people who are interested in stuff that I do because it's exciting for me. Again, total tangent. I'm all about tangents today, but yeah, I think no matter your level of social clout or whatever, the process of building the product is the same. And I think people should look to the future for their thing. But it definitely does help, for sure. It helps a lot. And I'm not immune to that. I do believe that it does help a lot. I have a huge advantage over a lot of artists just because I've spent the last 9 years, building this Twitter profile or whatever, working on these projects and working my ass off to get these names on that attract more eyeballs, that hopefully over time create a community of people who care about the stuff that I make, which is all I really want, really.
I don't think there's such thing as a tangent in this conversation because it's all different strands of the same web, right? There's so many things to consider in this.
Yeah, totally. And it's all fun. It's fun to kind of weave in and out, for sure. Yeah,
and it's fun too to see how they tie together, and even from other episodes, things that get covered again in different ways and as by way of different subjects. It's all, I don't know, it's just a fascinating arena to play around in and think about. So yeah, you can't help but go on tangents. It's like trying to cover.
Well, you guys have made a really cool thing, you know. Like it's, I love having the opportunity to talk about this kind of stuff, and I think you've both done an amazing job building this. And it becomes an invaluable resource, kind of in the way we were talking about earlier. Again, with the discourse thing, it's very easy for someone to drop a quick tweet and to judge it, but like when you're watching someone talk about something they're passionate about, and they say a thing, and then you're like, oh, this thing keeps coming up. You know, different artists keep saying the same thing about wages. Maybe it's true. Like it just has more inherent weight than that tweet did. So I think you're generating really positive discourses through doing this kind of stuff. Again, it's a huge pleasure to be here. I really enjoy it.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. We might be coming up at the end unless Moose has any finalized follow-up questions.
Sure. There's a few quick things we can hit on, because I know we are like, what 2 a.m. your time or something like that? But
it's midnight. It's fine. No,
God bless you, sir.
All right, cool.
I can go for a bit more.
So you mentioned wanting to do Kickstarter, and when we had JB and Andreas on our second episode, they're the two of the top best-selling tabletop RPG supplement creators. They mentioned that Kickstarter these days is more of a kick finisher, and that the old days you could just announce that you have a cool idea for a project and people would fund it. Now they basically want it done, and they're going to be basically buying it on Kickstarter. How does that factor into your planning with Kickstarter?
So I haven't announced it officially because it's not official yet. But I'm probably going to be working with a publisher to do the Kickstarter, and we are kind of already it's someone is a publisher who's done a lot of very successful Kickstarters. So excuse me, that was kind of already factored in for me. I've worked on a few Kickstarter projects before. And I think for me, honestly, it's just that I like the platform. I like the ease of use. I like the kind of ubiquity of it. I like the process and the excitement. Maybe I don't need to. Maybe I could find other revenues. But for me, it's just like there's something exciting about Kickstarter. I still find it exciting and vibrant. I do agree that is more often the case. I think for me, what I'll probably be doing is working up like a working sample of the game, probably giving that away for free so that people can try the game, try out the rule system, try out a scenario before they commit to a Kickstarter purchase, and then use the funds to finish it, basically, like you said. Again, it's kind of like I just like Kickstarter. I really enjoy it. I find it a fun platform, and because it's my product, like I kind of want to embrace the things that I enjoy.
And two more rapid, quick questions. These are from chat. One was, what are your thoughts on Instagram for artists? I know we touched on Twitter, but
I think it's shit. No, I don't understand Instagram. So.
And they just updated their terms and service so that now they can look at your other accounts on your computer, including your bank account. It's all sorts of crazy shit.
Hello.
Yeah, I don't understand Instagram. I've tried it as an artist, but I always found it obtuse and,
to say the least,
just needlessly difficult to work out how to build a community. I also don't like the lack of permanence. Like, it has permanence, but it just feels differently represented than Twitter. Twitter is very easy to click on someone's page and just see their slew of consciousness. With Instagram, it's much slower, it's much more curated, and it feels a lot more fake to me. Maybe that's just because I have more experience with Twitter, but I don't like Instagram for art, honestly. My Instagram is just like a personal account where I just post pictures of my food and like any dogs I've patted recently.
And I personally uninstalled Instagram from my phone after reading the terms of service update. So
yeah, that's gross.
There's that.
Yeah.
Final question, unless Joby has anything else aside from the typical final question. Can you speak to any of the positive experiences you've had during crunch while working at a studio or for a studio?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, just to back up then, I guess, if we're going to be talking about crunch. Crunch is a problem in all studios. Anytime you see an article about like Rockstar has crazy crunch, it's like, so does every AAA studio. They all do. It's never intended. It's usually just a kind of a coalescent of coalescent. I'm using a lot of weird words now. It's usually like a kind of combination of feature creep, which is a very common thing on games. Obviously, like more stuff gets added over time. Publishers being difficult, cutting away time, or trying to get as much as they can out of an already tight budget. And sometimes just production being bad. It's usually not production being bad. It's usually production trying their best to squeeze a complicated product into a short time span. But it is an inevitability on projects. In terms of positive experiences I've had with crunch, a lot of my experiences with crunch have been really positive. Mainly I'm thinking of like smaller projects. So for people who aren't necessarily aware, I mean, we all crunch anyway as artists, whether you think about it that way or not. You know, you've got an illustration due on Monday, you've put it off until Friday, and now it's like, oh my god, crap! And you've got all this mad energy, and you have this like horrible, stressful dash. You hand the damn thing in, and you like feel amazing, and then you go to sleep, or what, you know, however you feel. Like that's crunch, right? And that thing happens in games a lot, like I said. And the difference is, it's that shared experience. So it's that plus 12 of your mates who are in the same position. And I actually have, probably as a workaholic, have often really enjoyed that and kind of thrived on it. Like the whole, you get to 6 p.m. and it's on Friday, and you like look around at your team and you're like, we need to like ship this thing on Monday. Is anyone up for coming in tomorrow? And like maybe a bunch of you, you know, this is the ideal version of crunch, by the way, that I'm expressing. This isn't the norm necessarily, and I'll talk about that in a sec, because, you know, end the podcast on a positive. Yeah, like you know, that version of it is great, where it's like, I'm coming on Saturday, yeah, all right, and like a bunch of you come in the next day, and you order pizzas at lunchtime, you work through the day, and it's just like often quite a fun, weird, stressful experience. So I've like I said, I've had good experiences. It's not always like that. Sometimes it's mandated. Sometimes it goes on for a very long time. That just sucks.
Right.
But in terms of positives, like quite often it does feel like just getting a bunch of your mates together. It's almost like a LAN party with your mates back in the 2000s, except you're working. Yeah.
One last thing before Joby does the final question. Could you pitch your stream? Like, when is it? What do you do on there? And your podcast? Why would people want to watch that?
Yeah, sure. So I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/Paul Canavan. You can also go to nicefriend.club. Both of those will take you to the stream. I stream several times a week. Monday and Friday, I do a stream called Study Buddies, which you may have seen on Twitter. It's an excuse for me and everyone to kind of get together and do some studies. You can just come and watch me paint if you want, or better yet, join in. I pick a bunch of study topics every week, and we kind of do them together and share them online. It's very fun. I also do just personal work streams, where I just stream maybe my process behind working on a Magic card, or maybe if I'm developing a new project, I'll just stream the whole process. You want to see me developing a Alien IP? That's kind of what I'm doing right now, and that's usually on Wednesdays and sometimes on Sundays. I also have a Discord link to which is in the Twitch, and I mention that because the two are very tightly linked. We have a lovely, lovely community, and I highly recommend you join the Discord if you're going to get involved with the Twitch streams. So yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, sometimes Sunday is kind of my schedule. I do a podcast called The Nice Friend Show. It's a little bit intermittent right now. I think it's like roughly once a month, where I interview art and creative friends from the industry. I've done one with Anna Hollenrake. I've done one with Jay Axler from Blizzard, Carla Ortiz, Marvel and Star Wars. And I have a whole bunch of guests coming up, including, I need to nail down times, but Matt Nava, art director of Journey. Matt Mercer is going to come on at some point. And just a whole bunch of artists that I know and respect or would love to talk to. So yeah, that's that. And that's usually on Thursdays, but it just depends when the next episode is. I think the next episode may be with Carmen Sinek, magic artist and incredible shit talker, but I don't know for sure. But follow me on Twitter at @abigbat if you want updates on when that stuff is. Or again, do the Discord thing.
All of your links and information too will be in the show notes. So definitely, if you're listening to this, scroll down on whatever platform you're on and chop all those up. Paul, we just have one more question for you. What's something that's happening in the world right now that you're excited about?
Oh my God. That's a huge question. Why would you ask? Video games are happening right now. That's all I care about.
There you go. What video game are you?
The new WoW expansion.
Okay.
Shadowlands. The new Shadowlands expansion is amazing. I'm playing a lot of Shadowlands. What else is happening in the world? My community is really nice. That's getting me through this. Got me through 2020.
I like how this question gave you panic.
Yeah, I'm like, oh God, what is good? I don't know. But yeah, no, honestly, streaming, my community, and WoW are getting me through a lot of hard times right now. So I love you all. Mwah, mwah, to those of you who are here. And also talking on this show has been really, really lovely. So I appreciate this a lot.
Fantastic, man. Thank you so much. It's been excellent on so many levels, and I really, really appreciate the time because you are so busy. We both appreciate the time. And I think that it would be really great to catch up with you again in a few months to a year, depending on the approach of this project and your Kickstarter, and talk to you a little bit more about, what's happening there, because there's going to be a lot of themes, I think, in that are always worth going over again. And definitely get a signal boost on that. All right, cool. Well, I'll wave goodbye and hit the end on this record. Thank you, man.